Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here and welcome to my review of Doctor Who The Dominators, the first story of Doctor Who Season 6. And let's be honest, it's easily the weakest story of the show at this point in time. Not only is it the weakest opening story, but it's also the weakest Doctor Who story of all time at this point. And the strangest thing is, I wasn't completely bored out of my mind with this one. Strange enough, nor was I incredibly annoyed or pissed off. It's just that it's not a very good story, that's all. I liked it a little bit more than I did on my first viewing. I absolutely hated it on my first viewing. This time around, I just don't care. I just don't care for it. I don't like it, but I don't care for it. I still give it the same score, but it's only... I only just like it a little bit. The story is basically seeing two really annoying warlike creatures, I say, these Dominators, who are a very rough, dominating race, who go to, I don't know what they normally do, but in this case, these two have come down to the planet to blow up the planet to turn it into rocket fuel. Well, at least they have better motives than half the villains of Season 5. And Zaroff. But other than that, that's about it. And they've got these silly little robots called the Quarks that were supposed to be a potential replacement for the Daleks. Another one? As you can tell, the Quarks didn't really catch on. They make a cameo in the War Games and that's it. They're basically small people in these kind of boxy outfits with these funny little arms that come up and out all the time, and this woman has to voice them, and it sounds really weird and awkward, and it's not good voices. Yeah, the Quarks will not be becoming a classic Doctor Who monster, at least not in the same ways as the Daleks. They'll be well remembered, but not for being amazing. That being said, the Dominators aren't that much better. You've got these two really bossy, grumpy, nasty people. The leader, I will say, is slightly better than the other one because he doesn't the other one wants to destroy every person and everything he sees. That's not related to his cause, even if it is going to cause problems to their plan, whilst the leader doesn't want... He wants specimens, he wants labour, he wants workforce, and he doesn't want all this destruction causing problems for their plan, getting in their way. However, he is more than willing to do it at the end. When it's a okay, we can do this now. We can go and destroy them now. Although he doesn't really let the other one do it. Probably punishment for not obeying the orders that much earlier. He also likes to say the word silence more than any Dalek in the history of the show. So, you know, dude, you can say other words than silence to mean quiet. Why don't you try saying hush or shut up or be quiet every now and again instead of silence all the time? The Daleks are almost as bad, but this guy, I think, takes the cake. Because at least the Daleks will also come following up with, or you will be exterminated. And also, they haven't really got that many emotions. And the voices, well, they are Daleks. But these guys, no, this guy just takes the cake. And the other guy isn't that far behind. And I have to say, I do like, besides that, I think out of the two Dominators, I prefer the leader guy because he's not trying to destroy everything, at least not until towards the end. Whilst the other guy is so obsessed with trying to kill or destroy everything. This makes him actually a pretty poor character. There isn't that huge amount of development between the two. and I think the other Dominator actually got a little of the development and a little bit more personality than his comrade. After the third episode, it doesn't really help with the comrade, apart from one bit where he does follow the orders, but still. There's also a bit in part 3, I believe it is, 3 or 4, where they have a bit of an argument with each other that almost leads to the second one's being executed by a quark, but doesn't. And also they always have to go command accepted or obey, or all these other repeated quotes. It's getting a bit dull. And they look at the camera when speaking to each other in some scenes, as opposed to looking at each other. Why do 60s television characters do this? They look more at the camera and to the audience when they're supposed to be talking towards the other person. This isn't theatre, and even in theatre you've got to have, I would still say, you've got to look a little to the other person every now and again. It's not like you're addressing the audience all the time, but they do this in lots of 60s stories. They will just look at the camera when talking. It's not like they don't want to talk to the other character, because they'd be talking for ages. Or at least for a good a minute or two. I don't get it. As for the gongs, not the gongs, that's the crotons, for the Dolkins. Yeah, as for the Dolkins, they're not that much better. They have this they're peaceful, that's fine, they don't want to fight, fine. They're stuffy bureaucrats. Okay, we're heading into future Time Lords territory at this moment, except this time, Time Lords are in the 70s and 80s, mid-70s and 80s. They're portrayed as stuffy bureaucrats that will hang around talking about stuff more than anything else, as opposed to what we see in the War Games or the early 70s or during the Time War, or later on. So yeah, so from the Deadly Assassin onwards, we've got the bureaucratic Time Lords. They're not terribly interesting, I must admit, unless they're doing stuff. But the Dolkins, at least the Dolkin Council, they're exactly the same, except more stupid and boring. They will just talk about stuff relating to their planet, or just social. They will just talk when they're supposed to be talking about something else. It's like, let's have a discussion, even though there's a big meeting going on. Oh, I quite agree. I quite disagree, but I see where you're coming from. When the Doctor and Jamie are trying to get their situation, there's just 2 or 3 of them just talking to each other about stuff. And the same for when the leader Dominator comes into the room later on. And yeah. And as for the other Dolkins, there's Cully, who's alright. He's a pretty good character, I would say. And then there's the other 3 on the state at the radiation warning thing. By the way, did they ever exactly explain how all the radiation on the island disappeared that year? Did the Dominators suck it all up when they landed, or did it just die off naturally? Yeah. I don't know. But the 3 on that bit, the old man is very much in his old ways. Even when he sees the Dominators and the Quarks, he's still very much in his ways. The girl is a little naive, and her voice, what is up with her voice? It's so soft and so quiet. And the boy doesn't really do that much, apart from getting injured a bit. Development? No. Despite not being the worst side characters or the least likeable ones, they are probably the worst written, besides Cully, who's actually a pretty good character. According to the little booklet, it was saying about how this story was being written based on around the political times of the young people wanting peace and love not war, whilst the older generation viewed other people with suspicion, like potential communists, for example, and communist sympathisers, whilst the younger people were love not war. And also the Vietnam War had started up a few years earlier, so, and America's involvement. But funny enough, in this story, it's trying to reflect on that, but then to swap it on its head. So having the older people being the peaceful people, and the younger ones, or at least Cully, being the more action involvement, rebelling against the monsters. So it's kind of taking the idea, but then swapping it on its head. So it's not that much different to some of the other type of stories you might get in other pieces of media, where you've got these peaceful old people and then you've got these rebellious teenagers, perhaps. We could have had something a bit different. We could have had something a bit more unique if they had just 100% focused on taking that idea, but not swapped it on its head. It could have been a really, really good take on it, but alas, it's not. And our main characters, well, Patrick Troughton and Fraser Hines do great jobs as the Doctor and Jamie. They're kind of overshadowed by everybody else, and it's not a good thing because everybody else isn't really doing a good job. And Wendy Padbury does do another good job as Zoe, but at this point in time, her character's actually gotten worse since her first appearance, and she's a proper companion now. In several scenes, in a few scenes, she screams a couple of times, so she's meant to look a bit like Victoria. We'll get something like this again in the next story, and she's forced to change clothes every now and again. A bit like what Perry will have to do in a few years' time. Yay. And she doesn't really use her knowledge to her advantage that much. The best she does is plan an escape, and for Cully to escape. But that's about it. Zoe doesn't really do a huge amount in this story. It's almost like you could have done without her, almost. Or the story was written for Victoria. Either way, she's not really at the one of the greatest companions of the time level yet. I think we saw more of that in The Wind in Space when she was a side character. But yeah, in the next couple of stories, we'll see her develop into a much more better character. And the way the story ends with the Doctor and his friends digging underneath the Dominators' mine and grabbing their bomb or something, then slipping onto their ship, and it explodes in space. And I think the Dominators' mine noticed, but I'm not certain. But yeah, and the council do absolutely nothing. One of the advisors is killed, but they do absolutely nothing. Yay! I'm so glad that you included them into the story for more than 2 scenes. Okay, look, I didn't hate this story. I didn't despise it. I didn't feel bored on it, and I didn't feel as angry whilst watching for it, or impatient, or uncomfortable, or whatever after I had my first thing. I didn't feel like that this time around. I just felt, I'm not enjoying this. I don't like it. And it got worse over the story, surprisingly. It got worse until it finally finished. Ah. You know, I was wondering whether I should raise this to a 4. I was wondering because I originally gave it a 3 when I did my original list. And after the first viewing, I thought maybe I gave it a 3, and I thought maybe when viewing it, I thought maybe I should give it a 4. I'm not certain. Is it worth 3? Is it worth 4? But in the end, I'm going to have to stick with my 3 rating because it's bad. It's just poor. At least with the other stories, that at least had some good elements to back it up and keep them at 4, 5, or 6. And like I said, I'm going to have to be a bit more harsh on these types of stories. But in that case, the Dominators, I was actually a bit unsure whether I should raise or not, because I didn't hate it. But I really, really don't want to raise it higher than a 4, because it just doesn't really fit. So I'm deciding to stick with my 3 out of 10 rating, because it's just a bad story. It's not even everything else that makes it bad. It's just, like Ice Warriors, it was never going to be good, except Ice Warriors had some redeeming qualities, like the acting from our main characters, acting as well as also acting of some of the side characters, and some of those side characters were actually good. And the animated episodes, they were great animation, but this time round, you got one good side character and a slightly weaker performances from our main characters. They were still great, but they were weaker than usual. Same could be said for Fury from the Deep. And Wendy Padbury's Zoe is kind of knocked down a couple of points for this story after a great start last time round, which is that this doesn't signal good signs for the character. So we're going to have to rely on other stories for her to redeem herself. It's not really the character herself, it's just the way she was written. And Padbury does do a good job. Overall, yeah, 3 out of 10. Yeah, this is easily the weakest story of this era at this point in time, and it's a different type of the story I was saying I would have to be more harsher on, because this one is just plain bad as opposed to all those other points I made. But in the end, it just doesn't escape being a pretty poor story. It's a really poor story, so that's why I decided to stick with my 3 rating instead of giving it a 4, which I did consider. It would still be worse than the Romans, though, if it was. But despite some consideration, I thought, no, I don't want to rate it. I'm keeping it at 3. I don't care for this story. I don't really care. I'm not even getting that angry about it because it doesn't really anger me as much, at least not after this rewatch, maybe beforehand. But it doesn't really anger me anymore. It's just that I've gotten fed up. I didn't really care about it, that's all. So that's why it's got the low score. It won't stay as the worst story of all time, but it's going to be a weak story, at least for now. Certainly one of the weaker Troughton ones. Fun fact, this was actually supposed to be a 6-parter, but it was changed before production started. God damn it, BBC and Doctor Who creative team, did you not think we had enough 6-part stories already at this point? I mean, at least over the last year or so. I mean, you go back to a couple of shorter stories, but I guess they realised it wouldn't work as a 6-parter, thank God, and they just made it 5. About time somebody realised not every single story needs to be 6 parts. But this did leave a gap in the production block, and therefore the next story, which was supposed to be a 4-parter, also gained an extra episode. But this extra episode works in with the story. The episodes were also 20 minutes long per episode, so instead of as time like Dominators, where they're 2 hours to 2 hours 5 minutes, it's the usual 1 hour 40-minute ish or 1 hour 35 to 1 hour 40-minute story, because it's 5 20-minute episodes instead of 4 25s or 5 25s. And that story is, of course, The Mind Robber, which, after the Dominators, is exactly what Doctor Who needs. Also, fun fact, the Dominators was written by the 2 writers who wrote The Abominable Snowmen and The Web of Fear. And though after problems with the script and the production, they chose not to have their names on it, and now the name Norman Ashby appears on it instead. But these writers still hold the rights to the Quarks, at least, and the Quarks were supposed to appear in the 5 Doctors, but due to rights or something they didn't, and the Raston Warrior robot was created instead, though a Yeti does appear in that story. So yeah, you can blame those 2 guys for creating a terrible story. And whilst Web of Fear was a great story, Abominable Snowmen definitely has signs of the problems. And I suppose this production didn't really help with the story. Maybe if it was 6 parts, it wouldn't be as bad. But overall, it isn't really that great. And the ending, the ending's going to tie in with this new episode for The Mind Robber as well. So I'm giving that a pass. The ending doesn't quite finish the story. It's good because it's going to tie in with the start of the Mind Robber, and it's in that extra first episode. at the start, which then later ties in with the rest of the story pretty well, in a way. Derek Sherwin writes the extra episode, and then we go to Peter Ling's story. So I'm giving the ending of this story a pass because it's fine. It's fine as it's tying in with the next one, pretty much, and it's important for the next story as well, so it's okay. Although, there isn't... they also mentioned at the start of the story that Zoe has been... the Doctor's been giving Zoe the projection lesson about everything. So yeah, that's pretty much the ending of the Wheel in Space when he showed her the Daleks. Yeah, and this is the result of that. Yeah. Oh, and they make their first appearance 7 minutes into the story. And the deaths of those first 3 people to die on screen are pretty weak. Yeah. Okay, so I've babbled along about this story long enough, especially in the post-scoring sense. So anyway, thank you for watching. See you next time for The Mind Robber. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. I'm trying to burp, but I'm not. Yeah, you couldn't have said quiet or shut it or be quiet or just another word that's like silence, but another word for being quiet. Hush, shush. Just say another word meaning quiet that isn't silence every single time. I mean, you can say just say it. I'm going to say it again. It's not...